Hello and welcome back to Technology Now, a weekly show from Hewlett Packard Enterprise where we take what's happening in the world and explore how it's changing the way organisations are using technology. We're your hosts, Michael Bird
and Aubrey Lovell, and this week we are diving deeper into the subject of sovereignty in tech. We'll be asking what sovereignty actually means and what this looks like in practice. We'll be exploring how artificial intelligence and data sovereignty often go hand in hand, and we'll be asking one of the most important questions of all. Why should you, our listeners, care?
Yes, Aubrey, we will. So if you're the kind of person who needs to know why what's going on in the world matters to your organisation, this podcast absolutely is for you. And if you haven't yet done so, make sure you subscribe in your podcast app of choice so don't miss out. Right, let's get into it.
We know security and trust are vital when it comes to using technology. No one likes to give up control if they don't have to. However, when it comes to online storage for our work, our data, or even our intellectual property, we need to have trust that it is safe and cannot be stolen. This is an important topic that governments regulate how personal data can be used, but this also is known to have caused a few snags when it comes to cooperation between countries. The EU has a number of laws to protect people's data, but because they don't gel nicely with the data laws in the USA, something entirely new had to be drawn up: the Data Privacy Framework. This agreement between the US and EU would mean that organizations wishing to send data across the Atlantic would all have to adhere to the same set of rules, on top of any local rules already being followed. This data, being subject to the laws and regulations of the country where it's generated from, is known as data sovereignty.
But what if we expand the concept? If data can be sovereign, why not the models that use it? AI models must, like anything created in a country, adhere to the laws of the land. Controlling not just the data, but the infrastructure which uses it can be critical to national security. This means that not just the data is sovereign, but the AI must be too. And this doesn't just benefit the country from a technological perspective. Multiple countries around the world have sovereign AI strategies which will require a local ecosystem of workers, which should also create local jobs in the industry.
But what exactly makes a sovereign AI different to a regular AI model in practice? Well, when Michael visited Hannover Messe, he didn't just spend his time in a bath in the middle of a conference center.
I just want to clarify, that was recording a podcast episode.
Indeed. And he also spoke to Andreas Geiss, the Vice President of Automotive and Manufacturing at Aleph Alpha, to find out more about sovereign AI and why it should matter to each and every one of us. Let's take a listen to their conversation.
Can we start just by defining what we mean by data sovereignty?
Looking specifically at data sovereignty, the definition is that you can have your data at any place with any, let me say, possibility you would like to have, be it on-prem, be it on cloud, and you have always the full-time control and ownership. This means data sovereignty.
So what is data sovereignty in the context of the AI revolution?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's the goal, and as geopolitical landscape has changed a lot, this is enforcing that also companies make up their mind in the era of Gen AI what sovereignty means. You own the data, you keep the ownership, and you can always decide where to put data or get data out without any login. It's about the operational sovereignty, that you decide also where I would like to run maybe my Gen AI application. And this is getting decisive because you have a lot of domain expertise, which is getting reflected out of the data. The value sovereignty, that you also know what the value or the outcome, that you can decide what the business case and all the value what you get out of maybe an application is looking like. And last but not least, it's about governance sovereignty. Governance sovereignty means that you can describe to which standards, internal and external, you would like to adhere that Gen AI is taking part in your business enterprise on your journey. And this is, I believe, a core difference between Gen AI and sovereignty in this context and maybe other type of general sovereignty.
Because the concept of data sovereignty has been around for a while. Like I remember when I was like in the IT industry and the cloud landed and sovereignty was a big conversation. So how is the conversation changing now we're in the age of AI?
In the age of AI, I think we are talking of massive data which is being looked at, which you couldn't look at in the past.
Right.
This is more related maybe to also unstructured data. When you mentioned we always have been talking about sovereignty, absolutely true, but it was sovereignty in terms of looking at time series data, at structured data. We have maybe also machine learning algorithms, stuff like this, and that was also 20, 25, 30 years ago. Why does sovereignty matter when we talk about Gen AI? It's that all customers are worried about what is happening to the data, which has to deal, number one, with trust. Would you trust, Michael, if you ask a Gen AI application something twice and you get twice a different answer, to rely that your factory maybe depends on this or that your product design is depending on this? It's a bit risky, yeah? And therefore industrial Gen AI has again a new dimension which is coming to the table.
So it sort of feels like we've had this rapid expansion of AI, and now maybe we're coming to a phase where we're not necessarily regulating it, but trying to make a bit more like, how can we use this in industry? How can we trust the information that we have? So, I mean, are we seeing like the next stage of the AI revolution now then?
The next stage of AI revolution. So, number one, it's of course having the courage. Many people would like first to define what is the real impact, what is the outcome, before I maybe decide and invest into some use cases. And I believe it's in most cases the wrong way, because customers don't exactly know what the outcome might be. Gen AI can excite you about results which you never thought about, and knows also answers to questions you never have been amazed about. And therefore, it's important to just take the step and give it a try, which is easily done. Yeah? We can have a compute environment spun up in a couple of hours, get something running. You are smarter in a couple of days. It doesn't take long in order to decide what the impact will be, and then decide on the onwards journey what you will do in terms of operational scalability and how to bring that in use in order to create that business impact everybody's looking for.
So, why would industries in particular care about data sovereignty when it comes to AI?
That's a bold question. So at industries, it's important that all domain knowledge is, of course, within a supplier, within a manufacturing company. And in order to be on the forefront when it comes to innovations, you would like to secure your IP, that your data is there where you want it to be, that you always know who's looking at your data, that you have clear structures. What is also happening if you have certain partnerships who are dealing with your data, that this is going in the right way, and that you never have a type of leakage, what puts you maybe under pressure, or where a cool new innovation is getting overtaken by someone else. And this is what matters at industrial AI and industrial sovereignty when it comes also to data. And therefore customers need to have that trust, number one, first, before starting off the journey.
Does it stifle innovation, this sort of sovereign AI conversation?
No, I don't believe so. Yeah? So every customer has to be clear where he's putting certain workloads, if it's on cloud, if it's maybe on a hybrid architecture, or if it's on a private cloud instance, or maybe also on-prem. Yeah? So all possibilities are there. What matters is that you have a clear data semantic structure of your company. Given that, I think things are spun up very easy. Yeah? And if you look to new use cases, the most compelling observation I made the past couple of weeks and months, customers would like to have a safe environment they can trust, with partners they can trust. They have NDAs in place, and then you spun up a use case and you instantly get insights to value what you can discover.
We're in the EU at the moment, and there are clearly different countries, there are different rules and regulations. So how does different legislation from around the world affect data sovereignty in industry?
So it does affect. Yeah? It's of course a matter if you're talking of a use case in US, if you're talking a use case in Europe, or if you're talking also of a use case in China. So important is to adhere always the local standards which you must adhere given by law. Yeah? And therefore it's also important to know that whatever you choose in terms of technology, in terms of Gen AI capabilities, that they reflect the legislation and also the regulation in that country where you would like to get the use case spun up.
Thanks, Andreas. It's so important, given the speed at which technology is advancing, to have people working at the frontiers of innovation doing, all of that behind the scenes work to make sure that we and our data are kept safe.
Right, well, now it is time for Today I Learned, the part of the show where we take a look at something happening in the world that we think you should know about. Aubrey, what do you have for us this week?
Well, Michael, I do have my fancy glasses.
Ooh.
They are out again because we are diving into the world of computer chips and quantum mechanics. Very fancy. So before I get into the story, I need to teach you quantum tunneling 101, which you might already know about.
Let's say I do. But I'm also going to get my notepad and pen out. Hang on, I'm just going to get my...
Okay, get ready. This is a free educational lesson.
That's my piece of paper out and a pen. Okay, here we go. All right, I'm listening.
Okay.
Here we go.
The math is complicated, so we are going to ignore that bit completely. But the outcome is pretty simple. Once things get small enough, sometimes you find them in the wrong place. If you put an electron in a box and you make the box small enough, sometimes that electron simply, isn't in the box anymore. And it has somehow managed to tunnel out of the box. Are you following me, Bird?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, this is a relatively well-known concept within quantum mechanics. And the reason I'm talking about this is that computer chips are obviously very small. The transistors on them are unbelievably small, with the smallest transistor made, as of the date of this episode, so tiny that you could fit 35,000 of them across a single human hair.
Wow.
That's insane. But here's a problem. When transistors are this small, engineers have to work around quantum effects. If a transistor gets even smaller, the current flowing through it might simply ignore the, quote, on-off switch and quantum tunnel straight through. This would stop the transistor and potentially the entire chip from working.
Oh my goodness. Right. Okay, carry on.
So how do we get around this? Well, a paper published in Nature by a Silicon Valley startup has revealed that they have developed a new type of computer chip which uses beams of light instead of electronic signals to move information around. This is known as photonics. So think about like electronics, but instead of electrons, it uses light or photons. The thing that makes this chip particularly special is that these chips can be used for neural networks, which is kind of crazy. So why should we care about this new chip? Well, these chips could potentially be a two birds and one stone situation. Using light would mean that data can be transferred more quickly, which would increase processing speed. But on top of that, the chips would also be able to run using just a fraction of the energy needed for current computer chips. Although these chips may take a decade to become mainstream, in theory, they could provide a faster and more sustainable future as AI demand continues to soar.
Wow. Isn't technology amazing?
It really is.
I mean, I'm not even sure where to start with that. I mean, everything, it's just so fantastically small, unbelievably small, isn't it?
It's crazy. It's really crazy thinking about that, like smaller and so many of them to fit on a piece of human hair. Like I still can't get over that. That's incredible.
And it's worth saying, we at HPE, I know in our Hewlett Packard labs, we're also doing photonics research at the moment. So do you know what? I think on a future episode, we should get somebody from Hewlett Packard labs to come in and talk about some of the cool photonics stuff that HPE are doing.
Yes, I think that is an amazing idea. They do some really cool stuff over there and would love to hear it. Okay, well, while we continue to try and process the madness of what can happen when making a computer chip, let's return to Michael's interview recorded a few weeks ago at Hannover Messe with Andreas Geiss to find out more about sovereign AI.
How do you build data sovereignty into an AI model?
Number one is that you decide who are your partners you would like to engage with in order to connect with your data. Step number two is that you choose on technology providers who make sure that their technology is adhering to the local standards and also to their maybe internal governance policies, which the company would like to set forth in order to have reflected in all their Gen AI engagements. And third, it's important that you decide about how will you scale your solution later on. Yeah?
So would a sovereign AI interact with humans using it differently to a normal AI?
Yeah, absolutely.
Would a human know?
So if you interact with AI, you instantly found out, depending on the type of questions you ask, how sovereign this AI is, or how, let me say, perfectly set up is an AI infrastructure.
Would humans using the model know that the AI was different?
They would know, because it's the quality of the reasoning, the quality of the answers and the results you can get out. And with that you can, of course, judge. And again, judge, what means judge? Judge is, again, the super brain behind, the human who's judging the outcome. And so my answer is clearly yes, they would know and they would figure out.
So how does data sovereignty affect business models going forward?
My claim is, without sovereignty, innovation is merely not possible. Having said this, if you would like to embark on a new journey to reach more with less, to come to better qualified decisions, to come also to new business models, it's ultra critical that, of course, data sovereignty or sovereignty at all is adhered. And having said this, it's also very decisive that, of course, in the whole context of driving innovation, how is innovation happening? Innovation happens if you have trust in that what you do, basically speaking. And this applies also to Gen AI applications. So you need the trust AI is behaving in the ethical and sovereign way as you designed, as the user, as also the company and the owner. And that brings me to an important point. You should remain the ownership. Own your AI. Own your AI destiny.
Is data sovereignty always going to be a reactive measure, or do you think it could be proactive in the future?
I think in the past, looking a bit, it was by majority reactive.
Yeah.
Most of the companies, most of the customers I have been talking to, they have made a safe bet with partners, which turned out, since a couple of months, not being a safe bet and a paradigm shift in the future. And therefore, the geopolitical landscape has changed, of course, as we see. And with that, you need to rethink whom you rely on and how sovereignty will look like, maybe also here in Europe. We need answers, but we should also have an answer if uncertainty kicks in, that we are not cut off and that we can drive forward in reaching new business, data-centric business models, also with a autonomous technology stack here out of Europe. We see that disruption is taking place. We see that maybe also the load of model weights might differ. How much training intense cost you have to fund upfront depends a bit on the technology and also on the R&D, and again, coming back to innovation, what you are driving. And this brings me back that we have to have a firm answer, also when it comes to Gen AI, also when it comes to sovereignty here in Europe. That's getting decisive.
Yeah. So why should our listeners care about data sovereignty? Why is it important?
Because it decides about your future. If you will be here in 5 years or if you will not be here in 5 years. And that's a question looking back at the Fortune 500 list. How many companies disappeared the past 24 years? And I mean, not disappeared from the list, but disappeared as a company. And they got disrupted. And the same, if I look now in the future, in 2045, I think the same is true. And this is due to the fact that you need to keep control how you drive innovation, how you keep the ownership of your IP, how you protect also IP. And IP infringements are increasing. I mean, there are specialized firms and entities within companies just looking at infringements where they are happening. Because innovation is something, what is the lifeblood, I would call, what is the guarantee that I can bring something to the table of my customer, what is decisive and what's also taking care of the wealth of my company and ultimately, of course, also of the wealth of a society.
Thanks so much, Andreas. I hadn't even considered that building the AI to be sovereign could mean that you are cutting yourself off from other markets around the world, which could be risky. On the other hand, if we are building sovereign AIs, at least we can know exactly how they're using the data, and that trust is really, really critical. For companies especially, I can see why they would feel, more comfortable being completely certain of how their clients' or employees' data is being stored and used, especially if it involves training up AI models. And I think it's really fascinating. If you want to find out more on the topics discussed in today's episode, you should go check out both the show notes and our previous episode, How Do You Cut Off Cloud Computing from the Internet?, where we dive into the other ways of keeping our data safe. All right, well, we're getting towards the end of the show, which means it's time for This Week in History, a look at monumental events in the world of business and technology, which has changed our lives. Now, Michael, you provided last week's clue.
Yes, I did. I don't know if you remember. This clue came with super fun sound effects. It's 1983. Ring, ring. That was the sound effect. You've never
Beautiful.
guessed. Thank you. You'll never guess where in the house I am. This is, of course, the first time a cordless phone would go on sale in my native UK. Now, we are all used to phones these days being, mobile, but we all know that that wasn't always the case, because it was back in 1876 when the phone was first invented, and it took over 100 years to get from the original design to one which you could walk around your house and use. Now, this is a cordless home phone, which is not the same as a mobile phone, which, if you're a long-time listener, you might remember we covered a little while ago. Now, the cordless home phone was introduced by British Telecom and had to be charged for 24 hours before it could be used, and people could walk and talk on the Hawk, the mobile cordless in-phone, from anywhere in their house, as this new exciting phone was connected to the base unit by radio signals. Now, the phone could be used up to 100 meters. That's a little over 300 feet from its base unit. Let's just take a moment to think about the fact that it only took a further 15 years for the first commercial satellite phone to be created, which could cordlessly connect to a satellite around 780 kilometers. That's about 485 miles, floating above the surface of the planet. Ooh, now that is progress. Aubrey, did you have a cordless home phone growing up?
Oh, I definitely did. The one that I remember the most,
Yeah.
and I think we've talked about this before, like the golden age of the 90s. Do you remember we had like colorized wireless phones?
Yeah.
And they were just the big ones, but they were so fun because they were a certain color and you could see all the components inside the phone. I felt so cool back then, you know?
Yeah.
Kids today won't know. They won't know the joy.
I've got multiple siblings, so the cordless phone was brilliant because you could sort of hide it, so only you could have the phone and speak to your friends.
So true. It really is quite amazing. And I know we really have talked a lot on the show about how certain technological advances happen in such a short space of time. So I'm glad that we, have obviously fast charging nowadays. Could you literally imagine if we, still took 24 hours to charge your phone, or it has to take several minutes to, hook up to the internet? It's pretty crazy.
I think if it took 24 hours to charge my phone, maybe I'd look at it less. Maybe that's a good thing.
Yeah, it might be, actually.
Anyway, Aubrey, what's the clue for next week?
Okay, so we're jumping back in time a little bit. Our clue for next week is it's 1961 and modern computing is about to be born.
Oh.
Huh.
I mean, has to be the transistor.
Yeah, I feel like that's
maybe
a good guess.
Maybe I've got the timings wrong. 61. Yes, okay. I'm going to go for the transistor, but we shall see next week. And of course, that now brings us to the end of Technology Now for this week. Thank you so much to our guest, Andreas Geiss. And of course, to you, our listeners, thank you so much for joining us.
Technology Now is hosted by Michael Bird and myself, Aubrey Lovell. And this episode was produced by Harry Lampert and Izzy Clark, with production support from Alicia Kempson-Taylor, Becky Bird, Alyssa Mitri, and Natasha Nike.
Our social editorial team is Rebecca Wissinger, Judy Ann Goldman, and Jacqueline Green. And our social media designers are Alejandro Garcia and Amber Maldonado.
Technology Now is a Fresh Air production for Hewlett Packard Enterprise. And we'll see you next week. Cheers.